Tessa, Camp Ashfield, border zone. The soup smelled like the last 4 days. This was the first thing each morning, before memory caught up, before the tent walls registered as tent walls. The smell of overcooked lentils and disinfectant and wood smoke asserting themselves. The smell that had become, without ceremony, the smell of being alive. She was alive. Both children were alive. That was the arithmetic that started each day. Bram was already standing at the tent's entrance when Tessa opened her eyes, a folded piece of flatbread in his fist, chewing methodically and watching the camp come awake. He was 9 now. He had his mother's patience for watching things, careful, unobtrusive, noticing without announcing, which had been useful since before Tessa understood what it would be useful for. Saul was still on the cot beside hers, curled toward the tent wall, breathing in shallow, even draws. 6 years old and already a light sleeper. That had developed somewhere in the first 3 months and showed no sign of reversing. Tessa sat up, and the cold came, because it always did. Camp Ashfield occupied the western slope of a ridge with no strategic value, which was the only reason no one had taken it. The ground was still frozen in the mornings. The tents were military surplus, double-walled, and held the heat well enough if you taped the seams. She had taped the seams in the second week. She'd found the tape by trading a day's translation work, and the day's translation work had cost her a blister on her right hand from writing out administrative communiques in 3 languages for a man in the zone office who did not speak 3 languages. She dressed in layers, liner, thermal underlayer, the canvas jacket she'd acquired in the camp at Dreven before Dreven was evacuated. Someone's initials on the collar, THK. She'd sewn over them 3 times, and they still bled through. Section A? She asked Bram. Quiet. 5 cook fires going, south side. That's up from yesterday. New people. He finished his bread. 2 families came through the night checkpoint. I heard the processing tent. I heard 2. She'd been up at 3:15. The sound of the processing tent's canvas flapping was different when there were more people moving through it. A full family moving quietly had a specific weight. Section B ran the ration line, and Tessa had been Section B's logistics coordinator for 11 months. The title was informal, applied by consensus, and never by the zone administration, who came every 2 weeks with clipboards and saw only what they were meant to see. What the title meant practically. She knew the numbers. Registered adults, registered children, new arrivals in the past 7 days, total kilos of each food type, what was in the official manifest versus what was in the actual storage, and the gap between those 2 figures, which existed on every line item and varied in ways the zone administration's accounting never acknowledged. She kept track of both sets of numbers in 2 separate notebooks. The ration line opened at 7. By 7:20, there were 93 people in it, which was 11 more than the day before. The new arrivals, plus the people who'd been in camp but hadn't come to the line in days, emerging because the cold had finally made the calculation clear. Tessa worked the left station, adults without dependent children, singles, elderly, the men who traveled alone and who kept their eyes moving. She noted who came and who didn't. She had a particular way of doing this, the list in her head, running constantly, updated each time someone stepped up to the station. Davin Kaur had not come to the line in 6 days. Kaur worked the medical tent and had a cough that had persisted through February, and he'd been seen 3 days ago in conversation with a man named Pell, who'd come through the northern transit routes 2 weeks prior, and whom Tessa had been watching since the 2nd day. Not watching exactly, just noting. There was a difference. Moret arrived at 9:30 with tea that smelled like actual tea, which meant a Papavar relief shipment had come through overnight without Tessa's knowledge, which meant she needed to update her inventory notes. Thank you, Tessa said. Papavar, a good one. Moret was officially a sanitation coordinator. She also coordinated other things. Tessa had come to understand this gradually, not through any explicit conversation, but through a pattern of small exchanges that had accumulated over months into something clear. Moret would mention something she couldn't reasonably know from sanitation work alone. Tessa would note a discrepancy in a pattern of movement or absence. The information they exchanged stayed in the register of coincidence, which was how it was supposed to stay. They watched the line together. There's a crossing north of the ridge, Moret said. Davin Kaur used it 3 days ago, with 3 others. I hadn't confirmed Kaur, only that he was gone. I'm confirming him. The 3 others are unknown. We'd like names. I don't have names. You might, in time. Then in time, Tessa said. Not now. Mirette nodded and left without finishing her tea. The ration line ran until 10:45. Tessa tallied the figures. Dual figures, in the dual notebooks. The zone administration version, showing clean distribution by registered status. Her version showing the actual topology. Who'd gotten what? Who'd gotten more? Who'd gotten nothing because they weren't registered and wouldn't be, and still needed to eat. The gap between the notebooks was not about deception precisely. It was about the difference between what the records were for and what the camp was for. She'd started keeping 2 notebooks 7 weeks after arriving at Ashfield. Bram brought lunch at noon. He did this every day without being asked, and he had also, over 11 months, developed a precise sense of which information to bring with the food. Pell is eating in the eastern section, he said, setting the tin down, with 2 people from the night checkpoint intake. Which people? A woman and a child. Young child, 5 or so. The woman looks like she walked a long distance. They all looked like they'd walked a long distance. Was Pell with them during intake? No. He found them after. Tessa looked at her soup. They ate. Saul had woken and come to find them, wearing the oversized boots, moving carefully across the frozen ground with the concentration of a child navigating a balance test. She sat between Tessa's knees and ate without comment, the way she ate everything now, methodically, without waste. That had also happened in the first 3 months. The afternoon was inventory and retallying, and the particular small transactions that kept the camp's informal economy turning. A repair for extra protein, a translation service for a share of the pop of RT, the management of information about who needed what and how to move things from where they were to where they needed to be without the movement appearing in any manifest. Tessa was good at this. She had not known she would be good at it. She'd been a language teacher in Nymphaea, which had given her, it turned out, a precise instinct for the way systems of meaning encoded what they were trying to conceal as much as what they were trying to convey. She had been a language teacher in Nymphaea. That was not what she was now. The line between the two was 11 months ago, and it was drawn somewhere on the road between Nymphaea's Eastern Administrative District and the border crossing at Keld, during 3 days in which she had been carrying 2 children and 2 bags through territory that was actively contested by the time she reached it. 3 days in which her main calculation had been, the children are alive, they're going to stay alive, each decision serves that end. She had been making the same calculation for 11 months. It had become the operative structure of her thinking. Language teacher was the person who had preceded the calculation. Coordinator was the person the calculation had built. The zone administration's records were a language. She'd learned to read what they were not saying. What she hadn't known, when she was a language teacher, that this skill would be the one that transferred. Not the grammar instruction, not the lesson plans, not the patience she'd cultivated for the particular frustration of students who understood a rule theoretically and could not hold it in speech. Those had been real skills in a real context, and that context had ended. What had survived was the one she'd always thought of as background, the instinct for the gap between what a text said and what it was doing, the trained attention to what was being managed by word choice, what was being deflected by structure, what the silence between clauses was carrying. 11 months of reading the camp's administration had sharpened it to something she barely had to perform consciously anymore. She just saw the gap. It was like how, after years of teaching, she'd stopped hearing grammar errors as errors and started hearing them as information about a speaker's relationship to the language, what they'd learned first, what they'd been corrected on, what they'd decided wasn't worth the effort to change. At 4:30, she was finishing the secondary inventory when Merritt returned. Tessa looked up. Merritt said nothing. She set a folded piece of paper on top of the inventory notebook, set it carefully, with precision, the way you'd set down something that had weight, and looked at Tessa for a moment. By morning, Merritt said. Tessa looked at the paper for a long time without touching it. Around her, the camp was settling into evening, the specific shift in sound and smell as the day's business concluded and people moved toward the communal fires. The quality of cold changing from active to settled, the distant sound of children in Section D. She picked up the paper and unfolded it. A name, written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Someone in the camp. Not a name from her notebooks. Not a registered name. Not one she'd been tracking. A name that meant she hadn't been tracking carefully enough, or meant that Merritt's network saw further than Tessa's did, or meant something else she wasn't going to think about right now. She read the name twice. She didn't know the face to put to it yet. She would by morning. She folded the paper and put it in the lining of the canvas jacket, behind THK's initials, and went to find her children before the cold got serious. Sol was at the communal fire with Bram. The fire was going well, the camp settling around them in its evening shape. People gathered close enough for warmth, far enough for the privacy that no one had but everyone attempted. Sol leaned back against Tessa's knees and watched the fire with the particular attention she brought to fire, very still, as if she were deciding something about it. The smell of the evening fire in this camp had become over 8 months a specific thing she knew. The wood from the ridge to the north, which burned with a particular clear smoke quality, mixed with the cooking smells from the east section's community kitchen, and the ambient camp smell that was always present when a large number of people lived in a confined area. She knew this smell the way she knew all the sensory facts of the camp, as information, as evidence of normalcy, as the ongoing olfactory record of a place that was still functioning. The fire smelled like the camp working, like another evening, like Sol's hair in the firelit dark. She had learned in 8 months to pay attention to evenings that were going to ask more of her. They announced themselves, a particular wait when the camp went quiet, the day not quite finished, something still moving in the dark. Tonight had all of it. Bram was across the fire, talking to a boy from Section D, talking easily, the way he was easy with people, gathering information without seeming to ask for it. He'd been doing this since he was 7. She'd stopped trying to make him be less good at it. She'd done this before. That was the thing she didn't say. Sitting with her children in the camp that smelled like being alive. She'd done this before, and the before was still with her, in the way things you do and cannot undo are always still with you. There was a name in the lining of the jacket. There was a face she hadn't yet matched to it. By morning she would have both, and then she would have a decision. And the decision was not a new decision. It was the same decision she'd already made before, which meant it wasn't really a decision anymore. Which was the thing about doing this before. She kept the fire going until Sol was fully asleep, then carried her back through the dark and the cold, through the smell of lentils and wood smoke and frozen ground, through the camp that was doing what camps do, staying alive one night at a time, and did not think about the name until she had set Sol down carefully and stood in the dark with both children breathing evenly, and the paper still in the lining, and the morning still coming the way mornings always came, whether she was ready for it or not.